Hello and welcome to another episode of the Opus Well Style podcast. My name is Ivan Watanabe here with my partner, Evan Wall. Evan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, but a better question. How's the new dad doing? New
New
dad of
dad, we're
two.
we're we're good. We're figuring things out, trying to get my bearings a little bit. But we're
Everybody is.
everybody's doing well, thank God. So
Good. Mia
appreciate it.
Mia's excited about her baby brother.
Surprisingly, she is very excited to have a little brother. Thankfully, she's way more on that side than on the other side. So we
Didn't I
just
say that in
yeah,
our previous chat? Yeah.
yeah, we just got to make sure she like doesn't put her whole body weight on his head
Yeah.
because she
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
likes to like give him hugs and she doesn't have like a filter. So yeah, that's what we're working on right now. But I think that's better than the alternative. So
Yeah, exactly. Love it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, excited to have on our guest today, Dr. Judy Adamo. Adamo, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. So, Dr. Adamo, Evan and I are particularly excited to get some advice today on a topic that's close to us. So, um, for the listening audience, I think for those that have young kids or even grandparents that are trying to deal with grandkids, we're kind of excited to have you come on and share some wisdom with us. So, but before we start, why don't you just kind of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, sort of your practice, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. So I started out in this field many years ago, working with preschoolers that all of whom had some sort of developmental issue. And it was an immersive experience. And I was actually a rookie in the field, but was really lucky enough to start in that place where we saw many, many patients a year. And so that became my specialty, meaning early childhood development. And what I decided to do afterwards was just chronologically focus my work and my experience. So after the early childhood stint, I started to focus on subsequent potential academic weaknesses that may occur when we look at this subset of kids that start out with some developmental vulnerabilities. And beyond that, I focused on early adulthood and then adults. And presently my practice is with grown-ups, particularly parents, and I still see some kids, but I really focus on trying to educate people on potential developmental hotspots, weaknesses, and I also teach a class on it as well. So that's been my experience and sort of the evolution of my practice right now.
Can I ask what you like what you mean in maybe more detail by developmental was issues or delays? Like what range are we talking about?
I'm talking about beginning in pregnancy and making sure that things unfold as they should. And then we have the birth process, which is also, we really take for granted that these things happen, just naturally, but there's always potential pitfalls in both the pregnancy then and the delivery. And then right from day one, what we look for, what isn't quite right, what can be looked at as a developmental soft sign, just something that we want to keep our eyes open for and make sure that it resolves, or if it doesn't resolve, then what are we looking at? So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about development from the inception of the fertilization, really.
Wow, thank you.
So, I think Evan and I were having a conversation about this, and Evan and I are always talking about our kids and sort of like, what's the best way to do this? Or, hey, this is a strategy that's worked for me. Here's what are the challenges that you're up to? Evan, how old, your kids are how old now? You've got three. How old are your kids?
They're 2.5, 5, and 6.5.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And so right now, as it stands, right, I've got a 2-year-old and a 2-week-old. So I'm definitely behind you. And I think in my mind that we're sticking to 2.
Quick decision.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
what people refer to as in the thick of it.
That's
Although I
right.
think I'm like near the end, I think.
Yeah. So,
No.
No. Okay.
we were so Evan and I were kind of talking the other day just about, we're very routine oriented people, right? And I think a lot of our clients are, a lot of successful folks that I know are very routine focused, very, especially type A folks. And for us in particular, having our routines is really important to us. And then you throw kids in there that are very unpredictable, completely messing with the routine potentially, or like, if I'm doing morning drop off and Mia has a terrible day, how does that throw my day off? And so just trying to like get some strategies or some advice on ways to sort of, I'll call it discipline. I don't even really like that word at this stage when they're so little, but ways to sort of discipline our kids in a way that sort of feels empowering for us, but doesn't like feel like it's going to have a lasting impact on them like negatively. Like, I don't know how to better phrase that. But really just how do you sort of get them to do what you're trying to get them to do?
The $1,000,000 question.
I realize that there's no one magic strategy, but just sort of in general, what's a theme that we should be focusing on as it relates to that?
It's so funny because most people think I'm going to answer, this is what you should do for them. But the real answer lies in ourselves as the parent. And the best thing that we can do, getting our kids out of the house in the morning, let's say, for example, the best thing that we can do is to approach this task, which changes every single day, with flexibility, because we don't know how our children are going to wake up every day. And you have 3 children, Evan. One may be having a meltdown, and you're trying to get the other 2 to,
always, constantly. There's at least one. Yeah.
There's always one, right? So the first thing that I think we all have to accept, and it's nice that the 2 of you are routine bound, is that we have to build in time for these potential pitfalls, disasters, breaks in our schedules. I think you both know by now that the worst situation happens when we're rushing. That's when everything falls apart. And I always wonder if our kids really can almost smell our kind of anxiety because we're rushing and we're really hoping that everything is going to go well. And then it tends not to. So the first thing is for us to be quite prepared, meaning you have to have the time to get 3 kids out of the house. Now you're going to be getting 2 kids out of the house. And, just 2 kids in getting them in their car seats is enough work. 3 kids is a lot. So, I think a lot of my parents forget that it takes 15 minutes. I'm going to say 15 minutes to get our kids in the car, and by then they're potentially late. So time and flexibility with our own anxiety, right? You know how you start getting all amped up because our kids aren't listening? They know that. And I think it becomes a time bomb. So if we can find a bit of levity, find a bit of, who cares if I drop them off at preschool 10 minutes late? I know that we then get to the gym late. I know that it starts a whole cycle of things, but that's the potential problem, is that we're all trying to be in our regimented selves when we have kids, and it's invariably going to get messed up when we're trying to stick to precise times. We have to be graceful about it. That's what I think.
I've never felt more well understood than that. I mean, getting out of the house has become a journey. Like my wife and I now we've got it down. For the most part, for most days. But the trick is it starts so early. Like they can, we give them whatever. I'm not going to go through the whole routine, but like starting to get them dressed and like then brush teeth and take vitamins and get socks and shoes on, like it's an hour process between all 3 of them. My older can do it a bit on her own, and like someone's always melting down or telling you they lost a toy or they need some more food or whatever. And starting early and like teamwork, especially if there's two spouses, like it's
That's true.
And I totally feel if we are running late and then, you know, there's a lot of anxiety in the house and they're picking up on it more, suddenly there's more screaming and crying.
Yeah.
They ask all the time, like, why are you rushing? Why are you rushing? I don't really ever have a good answer for them other than like, I don't know. We're taking too long. It's just too slow.
You know, that's a really good point, Evan. It's, you know, because we're on our pace, we're on our grown-up pace.
When
where we
like
can get-
I'm used to going through the airport, just me by myself. When it's with my kids, 5 times longer.
Yeah.
Five times longer. And, you know, part of this whole discussion also has to do with our partners too, because it sounds like, Evan, you share with your partner, but there are, you know, there are those partners then who aren't familiar what the routine is. And then all of a sudden they are going through the airport. And then there's, you know, all kinds of tension because you're not used to it. So there's that part of parenting as well, which is who's in charge, which parent is in charge, and you know, is one going to concede to the other, and are you going to start, you know, bickering in front of the kids?
Yeah,
it's a very big thing.
We've come a long way on that. I mean, I think there was plenty of bickering early on, but like going from 1 to 2 and then especially to 3, it was either, you know, get on the same page or this just isn't going to work. And so I'm a way better father and husband now than I was, you know, 2 or 3 years ago out of necessity, thankfully.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because I think it's a tremendous practice in patience, right? This whole thing. Again, it's, you know, airport's a good example. Like I fly through the airport, right? I have
one
a
bag
system. I'm flying through the airport. I'm like looking at which line has how many people. Is it TSA? Is it, you know, is it clear? Is it, you know, which one has the right line? Like my shoes are coming off into like fast, right? Like I'm not wearing a belt. Like I'm so fast, right? You bring the kids and it's like, oh my God, you know, this is a very slow process. I got 17 bags with me. I've, you know, it's just different. And I think that practice and patience has been, you know, incredibly valuable.
Do you watch Seinfeld's Duke commencement speech?
No.
It was great. It was only like 17, 18 minutes or something like that. And a big theme of it was maintain humor. Just about in all of life. Like you'll never be at the end of life and wish you laughed less. And just, I mean, and the humor is so obvious when your kids are just running around all over the place. And you'll notice, I notice this all the time. Everybody else, when kids are screaming and running, all my kids, everyone else just thinks it's hilarious. They're smiling, they're laughing, they're mostly laughing at us. And I'm stressed. I'm like, would you get over here?
I remember going through the airport in Portugal, and my wife and I, we were Mia was here, Joanna and I were on the trip together, just the two of us, and we're walking through this airport, and she's probably like 3, face down on the airport floor, like couldn't be any dirtier of a floor. This kid's face is not having a meltdown. She's just like the dead eyes flat on the floor, and the dad is just standing over her like, I'm just here to protect her, make sure nobody tramples her. That's it. Like we're all laughing. Everybody walking by that has kids is like, I got you, totally get it, no judgment. I hope he's okay. Hope he gets through the day all right. You know, and until you have kids, you really don't truly sort of feel it, I think.
And we all have those stories where our children are doing something outrageous and we just have to bear it and just, you know, keep the embarrassment to ourselves. And we all have them.
Are there any things that you think, like, so I definitely understand sort of working on ourselves and sort of taking it in stride on our end, but tactically, like, are there any things that you'd recommend that do work in terms of, you know, discipline and or motivation to get things moving forward? Like Joanna and I started like a sticker chart recently to try to get Mia, because now she's a little over 2. So she gets the sort of reward aspect. Punishment doesn't seem to work in our favor right now, today. Now, that doesn't mean that it won't work soon, but right now it doesn't work.
Well, I have a particular philosophy about punishment, but we'll talk more about rewards, I guess. And rewards are great. because it really teaches a kid to become goal oriented, and it gives them something to strive for. And it also works as a bit of a focus. So, there's not there, it's a beautiful thing to have a sticker chart or whatever it is. If it's M&Ms, candy, whatever it is, it's a really nice motivator. So that's a short answer to that piece. But just the more global general piece about getting our kids to function, and you're both lucky that you have young kids and can think about this at least at this point. But you know this tendency to think that we're going to tell our kids to do something and that they are going to respond on the spot is it's a hopeful, wishful pipe dream.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't treated that little person like a person that feels like they have a say in their being and in their personhood, then why would they just respond to this order that's, being shouted at them like an army sergeant kind of approach? So from the get-go, from the beginning, our kids are human beings. They're like flowers that deserve to be watered, and they didn't ask to be here. And I think we must think about what our own philosophies are about children. And some people think that their children should be listening to them as if they are in charge and there is a hierarchy. Now, we know there's an inherent hierarchy. Obviously, there's a hierarchy, but presenting that hierarchy in a more familial kind of approach, there's nothing better than that, than feeling like you're part of this little community. And like, you have 3 kids, Evan, and your oldest kid is already getting better. It's a girl, right?
Yeah, my oldest, yeah.
Yeah, she's already getting better at kind of taking care of herself and, knowing that she has younger siblings that need a little more help. She probably senses that and feels good about herself, that she's a little more independent. So all of these things that we talk about in terms of parenting and, how do we get our kids to do whatever we want them to do? First of all, knowing that the potential is that they're not going to do what we want them to do when we want them to do it. But it all has to do with how they're treated and how they are viewed and how they're treated in the family unit itself, And I say that because it may sound logical or normal, but there are some parents who do not adhere to this kind of philosophy. And, then like at 12 years old, they're going to say, all of a sudden my kid is lying, acting out. And, and I'll say to them, is this the first time that you've ever seen this kind of behavior? And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be the first time if you're really watching who your kid is and what you need to be responding to at every developmental moment, which when they're young is every 3 months, so treating them as if they matter. And as I really feel like kids should feel like they feel like they're $1,000,000. That's what we want in our kids. And so when we say to them, Mia, tomorrow is going to be extra hard because I have to do blah, blah, blah. Maybe she'll be helpful. Maybe she won't, but at least you have that platform and framework from which to say, we talked about this yesterday, and I can tell that you're not having a good morning, but let me help you. What can I do? So
that's you bring up a good point, because I think sometimes at least I'm in such a rush that I speed up the process. So, and because physically you can, right? So, I mean, it probably establishes like a bad precedent, but I'll give it an example. Like if I want her to go up the stairs and she's walking up really slowly, doesn't want to go up the stairs, I'll pick her up and I'll bring her up the stairs. She'll freak out. She'll walk down the stairs again.
right.
And then she'll say, I'm going to do it on my own. And then we'll walk up the stairs. Right. Or if I like bring her down the hallway and she's like, no, I want to do it myself. Or I pick something up for her that she wants to do for herself. She'll literally take it, put it back down in the spot that I got it from, walk over again and do it on her own, right? So she's like establishing her own self, which is cool. But at the same time, sometimes I have to remind myself, like, you know, she's her own little person, she's
Yeah.
not going to operate at the same speed that I want to. And if I keep sort of in reinforcing this like physical dominance, I'm sure she's going to have some sort of issue about that at some point.
That's a beautiful example of her really trying to establish her own sense of control but communicating with you that no, you may be trying to make me do something, but I want to show you how I'm going to do it. That's really a great example. And it also makes me think about a lot of the push and pull between parenting is really a timing thing, because we're on parent time. And you know how slow kids are when they first start walking upstairs, and they're slow. And timing is really an interesting dilemma or factor in parenting.
Because I think if I were to boil down all of my general frustration, it's all around time. It's all around pace of how something goes, right? It's like, how many times do I need to ask her to do the task, right? It's, how long does it take to do something that for us takes 30 seconds, for her takes 7 minutes, right? Like that is what generally, if I were to boil it down, causes the most amount of frustration. So if I'm hearing you correctly, like it's just got to come down to a little bit of like patience, but also understanding that they are like their own person, right? They're their own little person.
And she's showing you that. That's fascinating. I'm sorry, Evan.
No, not at all. I was gardening the other day. We were planting some new plants in the backyard, and my middle child was out there helping me. For those listening only, put up air quotes. And put a bunch of plants in the ground, and we got dirty and went inside. And my wife, who used to be a preschool teacher, so has early child experience, was saying, "Oh, it's so great that you guys were gardening together." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess. I mean, it took like 2 times longer than it would have if I did it on my own." But but it was a great experience for him. He felt like, then the next day he asked, "Hey, can we go plant more things?" And it wasn't about how quickly you do it. It's hopefully whether he has a memory of that or not.
But you're bringing up another point, which is when we're doing things with our kids and they don't do it right. Like, let's just say planting, let's say they, don't dig the hole deep enough with it. They can't push the seedling down far enough or something. Do we have the wherewithal to just leave it alone, go back and fix it later? Because it's really about them and it's not about the plant, So that's the other part of, we're raising people that want to feel good about themselves, But you have those parents that say, that's not how to do it, or, you're not doing it right. Or so knowing that you can go fix it later and let them do whatever they want is also part of it.
How do you think you or parents or one develop I'll call it grittiness in kids, like not just easily quitting on tasks that can be difficult for them at first?
Sitting down next, if you notice then that your child is starting to give up, right? Starting to peter out in whatever they're doing. Sometimes it means that you sit down with them and say, okay, let's do it together. This let's do it together line, we all should keep in our back pockets, because why not? If someone's struggling and they need help finishing something, you'll see this with homework too. If they need help finishing something, why not go sit down and help them and maybe give them the answer if they need the answer, or, what's the big deal? So, developing, I thought you were going to go in a different direction about developing grittiness, but so that's my feeling about task completion, if they're having a hard time in that way. So you help them until, some kids need more help for a longer amount of time, but until you see that they can finish it by themselves, then that's fine.
Yeah. I think the context that Evan and I also talk about often, and we've had other podcasts on this on this similar topic, is sort of like, you know, our kids will likely not want for much, right? So we're fortunate enough to live, a good life, and so our kids won't want for much. But sort of, how do you raise kids in an atmosphere or an environment where they're not going to want for anything, but like to not raise, little jerks? I'll say it that way.
Be lazy.
Yeah, lazy or sort of, entitled children. And so I think there's this balance where, you try to create this grittiness, but also help them solve the problems, but not solve every single one of the problems that they have. So like, really just trying to get a good understanding, if you have any advice on that.
I do. And again, when I hear grittiness, my brain goes someplace else, but and someplace that I think is an important part of child rearing. So let's stick with kids that come from from backgrounds where they have things, right? Where they're not, they come from a nice place, let's just say. So what the first thing that we know already is that they see their parents working hard, right? Their parents aren't slacking. So in order to have what they have, takes hard work, takes discipline, takes whatever it takes for us to be successful the way we want to be. And so from very early on, telling our kids to do whatever it is that we want them to do, whether it's age and whether it's, cleaning up the toy room at the end of the day, and that could be in whatever capacity they actually get it done. If you really want to get it done the right way, then you go back later on when they're away and you fix it yourself. But there's this constant family kind of ethic that is, we're going to do this now, we're going to do this now. And like I said, they may not do it the way we do it, but they know that they're involved in something that is a goal-oriented, task-oriented thing. So there's that practical part. And then as our kids get older, and they're able to understand language and they have more sustained attention, then they get to hear about what our lives were like and what we've done and the things that we've seen, with humor, which with appropriateness, and I always think it's important for kids to hear about the failure stories, right? Oh, I knew this all intentional. Oh, I knew this person, or I saw this person that I'm just, well, and when they get older and you start talking about drugs and things like that, you can use your own examples, your own real life examples about what your experience has shown you in whatever capacity we're talking about. So the two things, again, are that modeled family ethic, which is, this is what we do. We empty the dishwasher, or, putting it with a combined kind of statement like, I'll do, I'll always do this for you, whatever it may be. But but let's do such and such together. And you'll see that your kids will want to be with you because you're not creating this us against them kind of lifestyle. And yes, they're going to come from a place that they live a nice life, but they live a nice life because you work for your nice life.
Yeah. So sort of like, depending on age appropriate, right? But younger ages, just the fact that they're doing the task may not necessarily mean they're doing it right. So like, we ask them to put the toys back. Maybe they're not putting it back in the right place, but just the function of doing it themselves may be like how they're earning their keep, or like, being responsible. And then the next phase, when they get a little bit older, it's okay, well, here's where it goes when you are doing that. And then the next part is maybe sort of like, as long as they're doing the action, it may not be perfect, but that's better than them not doing it at all. I guess is sort of what you're saying, what I'm hearing. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when we have our kids set the table or clear the table after dinner, or the cutest is when one of my two older kids will help my 2-year-old put his shoes on.
Oh,
Yeah, that's it's just so sweet watching.
so cute.
But they definitely have a sense of accomplishment. A lot, if I'm using my tools, so I always think about this. They always ask to help screw stuff in or whatever. And I remember asking my dad way back when to help out, and he helped me, or he allowed me to quote unquote help, just like I
Yeah.
allow my kids to mess around with it before I finish the job. But they
Oh,
definitely appreciate it.
that sounds great. That
Yeah.
sounds great. I'm thinking about something else that I want you to think about too, because it's a choice that you have to make. And it comes down to what kind of parent you want to be, basically. And do you want to be the kind of parent that actually puts into words what I just said? Like, um, you live in this house, and you know, because you live in this house, you need to do blah blah blah, or I work all day, and I'd appreciate it if you'd pull your weight too.
Or because I said so.
It's a kind of because I said it's that, but even more. It's like really I don't know. It's establishing some sort of squashing of their spirit in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have an answer for it. And I just think that it's something for us to think about as parents, about how we want to talk to our children and whether it's even necessary. Because I think if you establish the kinds of foundations that I think you both are already doing, those kinds of things are not even necessary. But I just bring that up because it's something to think about.
I have a question on a rather specific situation. There's been several times where, and this could just be stage of life, like he needs a little bit more maturity, but my 5-year-old, I feel like for the last 6 months, maybe a year, let's call it 6 months, about that, I've noticed he would lie about some things, and I would, I'm aware enough to know that he's lying, and I would call him on it like multiple times. I try to do this different ways. Like I'll talk about like how I don't lie and why I don't lie, or like I know that's not true. Like I just saw you do X, Y, Z. And he
Mhm.
just digs in his heels and he's like, no, I didn't do it. And so I feel kind of stuck. Like, what do I do? Do I just, I don't think ignoring it is the answer. Like, how do I deal with that?
Do you want to address that now? I mean, I have so many questions about you know, about how it got to this point. What kind of things is he lying about?
Who hit who first, who had the toy first,
Hmm.
yeah, probably stuff like that. Nothing consequential.
No, 5-year-old lies. So was
Yeah,
he in the middle?
he is.
He's in
Yeah.
the middle.
Hmm.
Hmm. I wonder what's going around the time that he's lying. I'm sure there's some background that needs to be, or some context that needs to be understood in terms of why in that moment he's choosing to say, oh, I did. What is he choosing to do? Like, he hit me first, and I hit him back, or something like that.
Oh yeah, or I had the toy first. Some stuff like that. Like usually him and his brother, somebody got hurt.
Mm,
Happens every day.
it does. Yes, it does.
Not always the lying, but like the somebody's getting hurt always.
Oh yeah, all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
All the time. Hmm. Oh, I have so many questions about it. I'm sorry I don't
Listen,
have
we can chat offline.
Yeah, might have to
more
set this up
questions than
offline.
yeah, more questions than answers. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, no, not at all.
Yeah, I think ultimately, right, what we're if I were to sort of boil down the conversation today, a lot of this seems to, and we were sort of looking for strategy or looking for ideas, but really what I'm kind of taking away is like just exercising patience as much as possible, understanding that time frame is going to be like the most challenging thing, and showing them how we operate is, in my opinion, again, I don't know the listening audience, but for me, I'd much rather be the person that shows the example and not says the demand.
Mhm.
And that seems to be but that, and also just respecting them as little, like, individual people. Like, if I don't think I thought about it in that way. Like, I very much thought of it as dad, child,
Mm.
kind of, let's get this moving a little bit. I'm super impatient kind of deal. So this has been super helpful for me. I don't, Ev, do you have any takeaways?
I mean, I think definitely just be much more introspective about, obviously patience is, that's what I remind myself all the time. That is the gift that is my children, as I learn more patience constantly. And, and especially for spouses, when you try and take equal responsibility, there's always one spouse that's in a better mood than the other. Usually because the spouse that's been with the kids the longest are probably a little bit more fed up.
Yeah.
And so I have found like real awareness around like the moods in the room.
Mhm.
And then, to the extent that you can, put yourself in the situation to alleviate your spouse, or vice versa, or just try and calm down the attention if there is
Yeah.
in the rooms, where I try and spend my time.
It's funny. I don't remember where I saw it or who the quote was from, but she was talking about, like, nobody ever has, like, it's never equal. Like, the energy is never equal. The responsibilities are never equal. And so you come home every day and then one spouse is like, listen, I've got 60% to give today. And the other spouse is like, I'm running on fumes, right? Okay, I got you. I'll pick up this piece. Or like one spouse coming in, I'm feeling great today. I've got a 90. The other one's like, oh, I've got 7. So like just sort of declaring like, where are we at with how much we can give today and
Yeah.
super aware is I think something that's a learned trait. I'm certainly working on it on a daily basis, but I think that makes a good point. Like,
Mhm.
if understanding like who has more to give at that current moment, may need to pick up the other one because you don't have it in you today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other parallel that this may sound insensitive, but I think there's a lot of parallel in training puppies. Because when you're training puppies, if you've ever been to a trainer or like a class, all the training is directed at the people, at
Yeah.
the owners.
Yeah.
And so in a similar way, like,
Yeah,
if we
yeah.
want to make any changes in our kids' behavior or reactions, you first need to look at, well, what are you doing? How are you reacting? Who are you being in that moment?
Yeah.
So true. That's really a great analogy. I forgot that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think we all have to remember is, just because it worked yesterday does not mean it's going to work today. Just to be able to accept that our strategy may not work today. So, and I think that goes back to flexibility and unpredictability and how hard this job is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Adamo, we really, really appreciate you coming on. Where, if you were to sort of point out maybe one more thing that the listening audience should kind of take away, or one more tip or one more piece of advice, what would you say?
I've been thinking about the whole Mia, how Mia kind of has to redo what she thinks that you're pushing her, that you've pushed away from her. I think that always saying to our kids that we made a mistake, or whether or not we even made a mistake, but showing our kids that we recognize them. And I want to use your example, like, oh, I see, Mia. Yeah, you actually, I think you even did it better than I did. Or, yeah, thank you for showing me that you really wanted to do it. And I'm sorry that I was rushing you.
Mhm.
That's what she wanted to hear, really, in that moment, because she was showing you that she wanted to do it and that you
My,
acknowledge that. And
my
it's
kids
about
love when
being
I
humble.
apologize.
So what'd you say, Evan?
I said my kids love when I apologize.
They do.
They
They
do. They
do.
like it. And if I'm like, in a bad mood and like and whatever, and I feel like I was right and they were wrong, which is usually whatever. But just when I say I'm sorry, didn't mean to yell at you, even though you deserve to be. I didn't say that last part, but
Yeah, no.
even I didn't mean to yell at you. I'm sorry. They're like, oh, all right, I'm good, and then they walk away. But until I say that, it's like they hold a grudge.
Yeah. So what do you think it is, though, about the I'm sorry that allows them to
Hmm,
be okay?
that's a good question. Um, well, it's what you were talking about earlier. Is it like it kind of puts us on a level playing field of they're part of the family. It's not just my
Yeah.
way or the highway, but like and talk about lead by example. Like I think showing humility and apologizing when not that I was always wrong in these situations, but like just apologizing even if it doesn't feel good, I think is a good example to lead.
Yeah. So my parting words are going to be that parenting is the ultimate self-sacrifice and ultimate strategery, that word. It's really the ultimate. We're always strategizing on how to, make them feel like they were right or that we were wrong or that they did a great job. It's
Right.
the ultimate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dr. Adamo, if folks listening want to find out more information about you or sort of get in contact for you, where can they find you?
I could leave you my phone number. That's fine.
Perfect. We'll set something up. So on the LinkedIn or on the podcast, we'll make sure to post your info. And if they want to reach out with questions, I'm sure they'll find you.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
thank you so much again for the time. I know you got one
yeah.
person calling you, so
I feel like we just completed a couples therapy, Yvonne. Me and you were.
love
No,
it.
it sounds like you're doing a great job, by the way.
We
Love
should.
it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I love it.
Well,
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Adamo. Really appreciate the time and your wisdom. And thank you to listening audience for tuning in. Please click subscribe below to be notified when we have our next episode. Thanks, everybody.